Good evening, everyone. I am Angel from Lima in Peru, and this is my channel, Reading Means Life. I am very happy because this is the month of the anniversary of my city, Lima. So I have read this book, The Lima that Pizarro Found, by the authors Gilda Cogorno, a historian who has worked in Peru and Portugal, a specialist in Andean archaeology, and also Pilar Ortiz de Zevallos, a historian, and she also has a degree in psychology. This book also has the collaboration of Catalina Lohmann, who has a degree in language and literature. Well, in just a sentence, what this book wants to tell us was the indigenous voice of Lima. That is a voice that has remained silent for so long. This book was published last year by Penguin Random House here in Lima, Peru. In the introduction, they ask this question: why did Pizarro choose the city of Lima? Just because the city was near the sea? Unfortunately, we think that Lima started during the colony when it was founded by Pizarro. But what happened before? That is what the book wants or intends to tell us. These authors have stated that what they intend with this book was to spread this information to the general public. We know that specialists, you know, that scholars also know a lot of this information. So for them, it might be rather something that they already know. But for the great public, they will find a really important and perhaps new information. This book has different chapters. One of them is, well, the first one is the limeños that Pizarro found. This is basically about the Ichma civilization, which settled in what is now the Rimac Valley, the valleys of the rivers Chillon, Rimac, and Lurin on the central coast of Peru. They spoke a different language, not Quechua. They spoke the Chinchay language. According to the authors, the population was really well organized, and the main wealth that the Curacas, who were the rulers, the local rulers, owned was rather than the property or the land, the control of the workforce. There were different curacasugos. It means the political subdivision of that civilization, especially Rimac and Huatka. There were many towns, many places in which people lived. Until 2001, the government of Lima had counted about 350. You can imagine how many. Well, the invasion or the conquest of this territory by the Inca Empire was not violent at all, according to the authors. Perhaps what protected these people, the Ichma, was how prestigious the sanctuary of Pachacamac was. The second chapter is about the surprising variety of the environment in Lima. Lima was not a desert at all, as many people insist on believing. The sea provided our ancestors with fresh fish, also seaweed, seafood. The sea enabled them to develop their fishing and sailing skills. They also knew the property of fish as a fertilizer. Also, the lagoons enabled fishing not only at sea but also there. They hunted birds, they collected some herbs. The islands were also sacred spaces. Even guano was considered a god. A unique ecosystem, unique to Peru and Chile, that goes along our coast is the lomas. The lomas or fog hills are, as I said, a unique ecosystem because you know that the flora and fauna only sticks there. Something that caught my attention was the fact that the author said that the Ichma hunted alpacas. Well, I know that they hunted deer and other animals, but alpacas, I suppose that they were domesticated. But well, it seems to me, or well, from what I understood, alpacas were also wild. There were also many forests, many trees that not only offered comfort but also fruit, such as the carob tree. And they had a very important function, which was to avoid the evaporation. So, in that way, water, which was a really, really important resource, was protected and not wasted. The third chapter is about gods, beliefs, and Ichma rituals. They believed that every geographical feature had was divine. However, you know that there were also existed gods like Bichama, Pachacamac, Urpaiwachak, etc. I am going to mention some of them. The two most important gods were Pachacamac and Pariacaca. Pachacamac was the most important god in the Andean world, even since the Lima civilization, which was the ancestors of the Ichma. Even with the Incas, the worship of this god remained. The Spanish stopped that, of course. The Lord of the Miracle, a Catholic celebration, a Catholic ceremony, might have had its origin in the worship of Pachacamac. Pariacaca was also a very important god. If Pachacamac was the god of the earth and on the earthquakes, Pariacaca was the god of the waters that came from both the earth, let's say lakes, rivers, and lagoons, as well as the heavens, let's say rain, storms, thunders. It is a snow-covered mountain between the provinces of Yauyos and Huarochirí. Some similarities between Pachacamac and Pariacaca were that both gods were civilizing gods. Their words and their predictions were taken into account by many, many peoples, and they were not only worshipped but also feared, even under the Inca rule. Many people visited them in pilgrimage. There were also feminine gods like, or female gods like Mamacocha, the god of water or the god of sea, Urpaiwachak, the gods of sea creatures and islands, I think, and also Pachamama, right? Though I think this goddess is not mentioned. There were priests and priestesses, which can tell us a lot about the role of women. As equal, okay, to the role of men, at least in that aspect of life, the religious aspect. They consumed some substances like San Pedro, which is a type of cactus, which is perhaps something that was not understood by the Catholic conquistadors. They were criticized, and they intended to destroy that, which in the end they achieved. The fourth chapter is about architecture. Expert builders, they built not only public and private houses, but also temples and especially roads. The Rimac Valley has has the most buildings on the central coast. There were settlements for the aristocracy and for the common people. The Ichma rescued or inherited the tradition of making adobes. With the Lima civilization, there were the adobitos, very, very small bricks of adobe. Under the Wari Empire, there were a middle-sized, and with them there was the adobong, which is a big brick of adobe. The complexes were about 8 until 60 pyramids. For example, in the most modern district in Lima, in Guayamarca, which is now in San Isidro, there were approximately 12 pyramids, but now you can only see one. This is unfortunately one of the many examples of destruction in our city. Not only by the indigenous or Andean or Amazonian people, but also by people who were supposedly more educated, who were supposedly more sophisticated, and they might have appreciated that. However, they didn't do that. Well, the next chapter was about agriculture. You know, in the previous chapter, apart from architecture, it was also to notice, also to note the ability they have to build roads. Well, in this chapter, I'm sorry for the traffic. In this chapter, we can notice how important agriculture was for them. They were, of course, a rural society, even though there were some yachtas, right? Here you can see a farming village. This is another good point of this book that shows some illustrations so that we can get an idea of what life was in the past. Um, they grew cotton, chili, coca, corn, etc. And not only agriculture, but also farming. There were animals like guinea pigs, dogs, and llamas and alpacas. The the area of the Rimac Valley was approximately 23 hectares. So you can imagine how efficient the control of the water was in order to harvest as efficiently as possible. The sixth chapter is about handicrafts, especially pottery. It was important both in daily life and also in ceremonies. Ceramic was broken, was destroyed in rituals. There are influences of other periods, other places. Of course, there was a synthesis and fusion, but we can also notice typical features, typical characteristics to these civilizations. One of the examples was that women as well as men were involved in textile. Also, cotton was not dyed, but wool was, using colors like colors that we wouldn't have thought about in Indian civilization, like purple or blue. They didn't stand out so much in jewelry in making that. It was rather rustic. However, it was still important and relevant for them. They also worked with shells and bones. They made flutes, knives, etc. The last chapter is about um, how the Spanish met the ancient Ichman, right? In the 222 pages that this book has, we can find it in which on which page? Let me check. Let me check. Let me check. Okay, right. Wow, that's a lot. Yeah, page 185. Okay, I usually underline important information so that I can get the central ideas. 2 years before the foundation of Lima, Pizarro sent his brother Hernando and Miguel de Estete to see or to watch the process of sending gold for the rescue of Atahualpa. They spent a night in Armatambo. They were welcomed by Taurichumbi, one of the most important rulers in that area. Many other local rulers went to welcome the Spanish. The richest one was the Lord of Chincha. The Spanish entered Pachacamac, especially the chamber, without any protocol, without fasting at all, because, of course, they were Catholic and they considered that diabolic. Hernando Pizarro destroyed the idol, and well, it marked a turning point. Nicolas de Rivera, the future first mayor of Lima, founded a town in Pachacamac between in November and December 1533, and also a small port. Pizarro, Francisco Pizarro, wanted a capital city, so he founded Jauja in 1534, which is located in the central Andes. And then he went to Pachacamac because the king had provided him with a great deal of territory there. So Pachacamac was about to become the capital city, but it failed because there was no wood and the sea was not appropriate for making a port, for establishing a port there. Um, um, he commissioned three men, Alonso Martínez de Don Benito, Juan Tello, and Ruy Diaz. They went to Pachacamac. They went back to Pachacamac on the 13th of January, 5 days before the foundation. They were talking about the Rimac Valley. So it was decided to found the city there. Taulichusco, who was the curaca, the ruler in that area, was an old man, so he co-ruled with his son Guachinamo, who was then Baptist and was given the name of Gonzalo. They welcomed the Spanish peacefully. they arranged the passing of authority, which was not something shocking at all because it had already happened with the Incas. Well, in the ceremony, the Spanish were there, the ruler Taulichusco and his son were there. Pizarro asked Taulichusco if he agreed with, the occupation, and if he agreed with the fact that the Indians had to leave that area. And well, Taulichusco did not object at all. The authors describe this as something peacefully and ideal, something wonderful unit. Well, I don't know if it was like that. I would like to know how much intimidation or threatening was behind, and how much understanding was also there. Well, the book ends with some comments by Miss Catalina Loman, and well, I have to agree with her in almost everything that she says. She starts by saying that unfortunately, we Limeños have a fragmented vision of Lima, of the Lima that Pizarro found and found it. And that truth is not a truth at all. So she goes against many myths related to the city. The first one was that Lima was a desert. You know that Lima was not. The garden city that we like to talk about was probably pre-Hispanic rather than colonial. The second myth was that Lima was founded just because it was near a good zone to make a port. But we know that there were many other factors like the population that was about 200,000. There were many good roads, infrastructure, and wood. The third myth was that there was not an important civilization there. Even one of the most important historians, like Raúl Porras Barrenechea, minimizes the impact or the relevance of the Ichma civilization. The Ichma were wise and they were sophisticated. That is unfortunately something that we still don't know. You can find a picture here, ceremonies. You can see the agriculture, the fields. You can see the buildings, right? So they were not a rustic culture at all. The fourth myth was that Lima was just that Curacasco, okay, that local Curacasco that Taurichusco governed, which was not, of course. There were many other subdivisions, and the valley of the river Rimac was the biggest on the central coast. The fifth myth that, well, to be honest, I have never heard related to coastal peoples, but Andean ones, was that ancient Limeños only ate potato, corn, and quinoa, Andean cereals. But well, we know that their diet was much better and better balanced than ours. They controlled valleys, also the folk hills that I talked about some minutes ago. The sixth myth was that Lima is connected with the Andes and the Amazon just some decades ago with the immigration by rural people to the city in the 1960s or 1970s maybe, which in fact Lima has always been a place of fusion thanks to the hills that unfortunately you cannot see behind. They go directly to the Andes. So Lima has always been a place in which people went to or went from the Andes. So which is something that we need to value and which is something that we need to know. So I give 4.5 stars out of 5 to this book. This is didactic, this is well done, well written. That is very easy to read. It's not boring at all. There are many things that we might discover or rediscover about our city, especially by people who consider Lima our city, not necessarily being born here, but having chosen this as our home. It is a pity, it is a shame that sometimes we appreciate other cities and we tend to focus on the negative aspect of our city. Of course, Lima has many problems. One of them is the noise pollution that you can find here. Well, yeah, there are many problems in infrastructure at this moment. However, we need to know our legacy. We need to know that things were not black and white. And by black and white, I also include the races, the Spanish and the Afro and the African race. What about the role of Indian people and the legacy that that we can still trace even now? So I really recommend this book. That book is in Spanish. However, I hope that one day there is an English version. At least I have intended to tell you what this book is about. So I really, really recommend it. Bye bye.